On this episode of AV Week, major merger and acquisition week in the AV industry, AVI-SPL and Whitlock, as well as Yorktel and VCA. In addition to that, LG is pulling out of ISE, what that means for Integrated Systems Europe 2020, and all those attending. All that and more. Next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 442, recorded Thursday, February 6th, 2020. Don't panic.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Shure, sound extraordinary,
and by Access Networks,
and by QSC, who invites you to go native with the QSys audio-video and control ecosystem.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. We have had a week of mergers and acquisitions, actually starting about a week ago through today. We are recording this on the 6th of February as the rest of us get ready for ISE, Integrated Systems Europe. So, but one of the major announcements took the SEN Top 50 and I guess shrunk it. Now, I don't know if it shrunk it down by one or not, but it took number 1 and number 3 and sort of combining them together with me to talk about the merger between AVI-SPL and Whitlock is my buddy, Mr. Nathan Legg from AVI-SPL. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Tim. How's it going?
Good. We're using an article from our friends over at AV Magazine per their article there talking about Marlin Equity. Marlin is the company that got a majority stake in Whitlock a number of years ago. They are getting a majority stake in AVI-SPL and kind of combining the two together. First kind of question for you there. When it comes to AVI-SPL, the number 1 on the SEN Top 50, and Whitlock, the number 3 there, what is this new merged company going to be called?
We'll actually continue as AVI-SPL.
Okay.
But it's important to note that nothing will change at this point until this agreement. What we discussed was, or what we announced, I should say, is this is a definitive agreement to merge. Okay. And once that is finalized, which we're hoping for by the end of this quarter, that is when we'll be able to work together, and that's work together as AVI-SPL.
And just to be clear, there are certain things that you're going to be able to say, and the way you're saying it, there's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo here that you've got to be careful of as a representative of AVI-SPL and also as an employee of AVI-SPL. So he's right. Not being funny. He's just,
I'm not dodging any questions.
No.
Dodging any questions.
No, absolutely. All right. So kind of walk me through a merger of this size, an agreement of this size is massive, at least in the AV world. There are others outside of it in the tech world that they would see this and go, oh yeah, that happens on Tuesdays. But here it's a pretty significant one. So walk me through, how did this agreement come about?
Well, it's pretty much as you mentioned. Marlin Equity Partners was a Whitlock stakeholder actually, I think it was since last October. As they were looking at different ways to grow, this opportunity presented itself to both companies. And as with most opportunities, this one looked too good to pass up. So that's really where it ends there. It was just something that needed to happen.
All right. One question that always comes up in any sort of merger and acquisition is what this means, first and foremost to the employees of both companies, but also honestly to the customers. AVI-SPL and Whitlock both have had tremendous growth, both in the North American markets, but also internationally as well. You and I are both heading to ISE. That AVI-SPL has had a stand there for a number of years, but also to the vendors. So what does this mean to all the stakeholders kind of connected to it?
I think ultimately it means that it's a chance to just work with more great people as one company. It's something that, again, going back to the last question, when we talk about this being a great opportunity, there's this was a great opportunity because of a growing industry. It's the growing need from our customers, from a needing that local support, that global delivery, and a bunch of different options in terms of those digital workplace services. So by having a lot more talent, a lot more great minds at work, driving toward one goal, I think ultimately it's just going to be something that we have people that are very excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the local support, and I talked for a second there about your expansion. How does a merger like this help AVI-SPL and everybody kind of, as this deal gets done, all the folks that are connected with the company, how does this help you in that global expansion and honestly with the connecting and the servicing of your customers, globally, but also at a local level?
So again, it goes back to, our collective or individual resources as a collective, taking each other's best practices. Once this agreement is finalized, we're actually getting together as a team and saying, what's the go forward plan here? How are we going to make this all happen? And it's going to be taking each other's best practices and putting together that strategy that delivers the results that we both expect.
All right, very good. Nathan, I appreciate your time. I mentioned the fact that you guys will be at ISE. So as we're posting this on the Monday before, how do people get a hold of you, get a hold of AVI-SPL, or where can they find you during the ISE show?
Well, I hope they could stop at our booth. That's going to be stand number 11-C155. They make it really easy to remember, right? But outside of that, I'm available on LinkedIn. Nathan Legg. I'm there. You'll find me. And you can also follow AVI-SPL at AVI-SPL Info on Twitter.
All right. Thank you, Nathan Legg. Nathan Legg, again, from AVI-SPL, with us to talk about that story and the rest of the mergers and acquisitions and the rest of the news we've gathered for the week. Mr. Bradford Ben from, well, he's my boss, so parts unknown, but also from AVNation. Welcome, sir.
I'm doing well, and just because AV James likes me to say it, allow me to put in my disclaimer once again. I speak for no one but myself. My opinions do not represent those of my employer, my wife, my friend Tim, my dog, my enemies. Anyone but me is who I speak for. So if you don't like what I say, it's all my fault. If you like what I say, it's all my fault.
There are days he does speak for me, just for the record. Also with us is Tom LeBlanc from NSCA. Welcome, sir.
Hey, it's good to be here, Tim.
So again, let's wrap up again. We've got two. I mentioned two. Another merger and acquisition. Obviously, the big one here is AVI-SPL and Whitlock merging together. Roughly $1.3 billion. If you pay attention to SCN's top 50, this is number one and number two. Combining together. In addition to that, you've also got Yorktel acquiring VCA, Video Corporation of America, out of New York. This one's a little bit different, though. VCA is going into bankruptcy, and so some people have referred to this as almost like a bankruptcy acquisition. February 3rd is when VCA filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy in U.S. Bankruptcy Court in New Jersey. This is from the folks, at good Lord, at Yorktel. Good Lord, I can't even think. It says, quote unquote, we will now be able to offer a broader market, a full suite of services, including managed conference services, media services, system integrations, maintenance, and staff augmentation and support. Bradford, I'm going to start with you on this. Both of these mergers and acquisitions come this week. The week before ISE, I don't know if that was planned or not. I don't know if it's a first quarter thing or not. Obviously, the AVI-SPL and Whitlock one has been in talks for quite a while, just because of the nature. Now, just so we're clear again, the AVI-SPL Whitlock piece is not done. Neither is the Yorktel and VCA. These deals are not signed, sealed, and delivered yet. They are both kind of announcing their intention. If both of these deals go through, what does this do to the landscape of the industry? What does it do to the landscape of integrators out there?
So I think the landscape of the industry is going to change more than expected with AVI-SPL and Whitlock becoming acquired. It's a merger, but it's also an acquisition by a venture or a capital company, a venture capital company that's looking at this as let's bring in more profit. And by getting rid of one of your competitors, it's definitely going to be helpful. But the bigger thing is the sheer size and scale of them. When I left Harman about 2 years ago, we were a $1 billion a year revenue company for Harman Pro. The size of revenue from AVI-SPL and Whitlock being projected at $1.3 billion is going to be big. It's going to give them a lot more leverage and perhaps an unfair amount of leverage against manufacturers of you need to do this for us. We need a special OEM one. So I do think that's going to be somewhat similar to what happened with Guitar Center and the mom and pops guitar stores. Guitar Center became so powerful, a lot of the smaller independent guitar stores went away. And I think that Yorktel and VCA is a completely different animal. I think I don't want to say fire sale, but Chapter 11 bankruptcy isn't a small thing. Sometimes being acquired is your best way to get your cash flow back, pay off your debtors, and more importantly, keep all of your people employed. I know, having gone through, various business permutations over the past dozen so years there are times the best decision is to let yourself be bought so that your employees can still, get paid, have health insurance, etc. So that one I put in a different category, because once you file Chapter 11, you're kind of saying, okay, we need some help. Things are going on. We're in the deep end, and Yorktel was ready to come in and help them. And I think that's a good thing. I think having another company stay afloat is good, because I think if we had just lost another top 20 integrator, that's a different issue than merging two top 20 integrators. I think the big push with the large companies, that's huge. And I do think that in Yorktel and VCI, I think there's going to be less pruning of overlapping skills because they're not as wide flung. I think in AVI-SPL and Whitlock, I think there's going to be, let's go to centralized purchasing, let's go to centralized payroll, let's do this as centralized. And having been someone who's worked for those big monolithic companies, sometimes that becomes becomes a disadvantage, because you now have all these overhead steps to take care of. You're doing things like holding purchase orders so you can order 10 of something and get a bigger discount instead of ordering the one you need to be able to finish the project. So I think there is some risk there, but I think the big thing is they're going to be a stalwart. They're going to have a huge footprint, going to be able to do what Joe hates of. I think these are going to be the people who can do AV as a service. Despite what Joe Way says, I think they're going to be big enough, have enough of a footprint that for corporate AV and conference rooms, they're going to be able to pull that off, especially when you look at things like the 24/7 support that AVI-SPL has, which is something that would expand on what Whitlock has. So I think it's a big deal, and it's going to have repercussions probably for 2 or 3 years. I also think that if there is shedding of personnel, that's going to be a bonus for some of the competitors to those companies, because there might be people who are like, well, I joined AVI, I joined SPL, this isn't that company anymore. I joined Whitlock, it's not that company anymore. So I think this is a big monumental watershed moment, kind of like Samsung buying Harman. It's going to have long-term repercussions that we don't even begin to understand yet. It honestly wouldn't surprise me a $1.3 billion revenue that they don't start manufacturing their own products and
Wow.
not having suppliers anymore. Because if you can call up a Chinese manufacturer and go, build me 1,000 of these, it kind of changes a whole lot of things. Sorry, I kind of wandered there, but
No,
as you can tell, I think it's a big thing.
It's a great point. I do have to correct myself. I misspoke. Whitlock was not number 2 on SCN's top 50. They were number 3. But it was AVI-SPL, Diversified, and then Whitlock. Tom, what are the interesting things about this deal? Let's start with there. Is they are characterizing it as an acquisition. The company that's funding this is Merlin. The company that owned majority of Whitlock is now going to be the majority owner of these two companies together. Things like this have increased over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years. I know that you and I were a part of a couple of discussions at the NSCA BLC a couple of years ago, talking about companies being acquired by venture capitalists and investment banks coming in. When things like this happen and we start seeing more and more investment by investment firms and investment banking, whether that is from the integrator side or even the manufacturer side, should we see that as a good sign in the industry? In other words, these companies are looking at integrators, they're looking at manufacturers, and they're saying, hey, you know what? This is a good investment. We think that these companies are going to be in for the long haul. We think these companies are profitable. So we're going to invest our funds in here with the idea that obviously we think that we're going to get a return on this.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but, I guess if you want to look on the bright side, which, is probably a good thing to do, it's a sign that, really smart investors see a lot of future for, the AV market and particularly for AV integration. It also, very much changes the dynamic of the industry. And this is not new, right? Like we've been talking about this, like you mentioned, we talked about it at BLC a couple of years ago. When I was at Commercial Integrator, we wrote an awful lot about it. In fact, I remember, I think it was the State of the Industry report in probably 2018, where I had a title, The Incredible Shrinking Industry. And I mean, kind of the point of that was, yeah, the industry is growing on one level because, as we just described, there's a lot of money being funneled into the AV industry, but there are fewer companies that are providing the AV integration. And that's because of so much consolidation at the top. And that's because, the top few companies are getting bigger and bigger, often fueled by this venture capitalist money. And it very much changes the dynamic of the industry. Beyond the companies that you mentioned, there was another acquisition just before that. Diversified had acquired Sensory Technology. And,
Yep.
I think at NSCA, I think we saw a reduction of 4 NSCA member companies within just the last few days, the last couple of weeks. And we always joke at NSCA that our colleague Teresa, who's kind of, responsible for, being the liaison for integration companies, I don't know if her job got easier or harder, but there's less companies for her to get to deal with right now. I think the other thing is, though, like we always kind of framed it as, you can look at it as these companies at the top are getting to be this behemoth opponents in the marketplace that are going to be difficult to go to battle with. However, the flip side of that is it creates more of a opportunity for a unique value proposition for the smaller integration firms, because now we've got this whole spectrum. We've got these big companies at the top, and then we've got companies that are kind of like, $20 million, $50 million companies that kind of still make up the bulk of the industry. And I think there's an opportunity for those companies to, really identify, what do we want to be? How are we going to be unique? How are we going to compete in this changing marketplace? And obviously, it's not a positive for them that now their biggest competitors are getting bigger and more difficult to compete with. But it is an opportunity for them to kind of look strategically within their organization and identify, here's what we do uniquely. And here's what we do in a custom way that it's difficult for a very large organization to compete with on our level. And there's that opportunity. The other thing I wanted to mention though, Tim, like with all these mergers and acquisitions, they don't always work, right? And when they don't work, it's usually because the company cultures don't match. And I'm not making any kind of a statement about any of the recent mergers because, what the heck do I know about, whether or not the company cultures are going to be in sync. But like when company cultures are a match in a merger and acquisition situation, it turns out really well. Like the positive is overwhelming. But when it doesn't match, it is such a mess. And it's a mess to the point where the company suffers and they shed employees and they spawn new competitors that continually create challenges down the road. So it'll be interesting to watch that. NSCA has this pretty cool white paper like that kind of dives into like best practices when it comes to exploring, whether or not you should be in this M&A world. And it has, cautionary tales and it has good advice. And, if we've learned one thing in the past couple of weeks from all these mergers, it's that everybody needs to be reading up on what if this becomes part of their work life.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is something to be said about that. One thing I want to bring Bradford back in here real quick. We actually talked about the disparity here when we covered the SDN top 50. And let me read something off here real quick, guys. And Bradford, I'll get your take on this. And Tom, feel free to jump in. At the time, AVI-SPL was the number one. They were at 905 million. 2 was Diversified at 875. Whitlock was 3 at 360. Then you drop down to number 4, AVI Systems at $290 million. Then you drop again down to $167 million. Then to 150. By the time you hit the top 10 in the U.S., you were barely over $100 million, 115 with SKC Communications out of Kansas City. By the time you get to the 20s, right, of the SCN top 50, you are well below that. Code Media is at $60 million. So you've got a ginormous disparity between almost $1 billion, which will be $1 billion now, 1.3, down to $60 million. Bradford, what to Tom's point about making sure that you understand where you are. The smaller companies can be more nimble. They can do some things that ginormous corporations can't. Whether that's Samsung and Harman, or whether that's Snap AV now, which is the most recent good size acquisition with merging with Control 4, where you've got bigger pockets, you've got bigger processes and more people, but you also sometimes lose some of that nimbleness.
So I think one of the key things is that very often we're looking at the success of a company as their top line revenue, which, while it's important and gives you an idea of the size, that doesn't talk a whole bunch about whether or not they're making a profit, whether or not their margin is at 5% or 20%, whether or not they're providing good product, whether or not, to quote, as Tom alluded to, it's a good culture, it's a non-toxic culture. All those things aren't quite wrapped up in there. Also, there's the fact that this is self-reported values. So some of these, not everyone reports.
That is accurate. Yeah, there are a couple of folks that we've talked to in the past who actively do not report to that, yes.
Right. So, but I also do think that this illustrates a widening of choices. But the same thing's happening with Amazon and other box companies. Anytime you get these monolithic, huge companies, they become the hire them, off it goes, it gets cranked. And I think a lot of it, though, is due to some of these larger volume companies being able to support large dollar corporate companies that have huge footprints. If I am a Fortune 100 company and I need to roll out 3,000 conference rooms, am I going to call AVI-SPL that has that can handle $1 billion worth of revenue? Or am I going to call the local guy who can do it, can give me my good service, can show up on weekends, can do all that stuff, but can't handle all 3,000? And that's a different decision. But then you look at some of the other key parts of the AV market. This AVI-SPL and Whitlock, the vast majority of their income is through corporate. That's what they specialize in. Now, if you're building a church, other house of worship, stuff like that, are you going to want to call AVI-SPL who's not specialized in that? Or are you going to want to call a smaller company, maybe one that's local, that's going to treat you a little more special than a big company? So the divergence in revenue doesn't scare me, because I think that's natural based on the customer basis. It would be like saying your mom and pop grocery store at the corner doesn't make as much as Walmart. But where do you go food shopping more often? The example I can use is some companies don't want to get that big. I think I think all three of us know companies that have said, I'm perfectly happy being at a $100 million company. My kids can go to whatever college they want. I can pay for everyone. Everyone's well insured at the office, etc. Easy, done. That's their level of comfort. That's why I'm kind of like this. How big your top line revenue isn't the gauge of a quality company. Yes, it means they can finance bigger projects. Yes, in theory, they have more people that can do more projects simultaneously. But volume and quantity and quality aren't always the same. So I think there's a large opportunity for these smaller and medium-sized AV companies to still make a dent and be active, like Yorktel, like VCA, like Omega Audio Video, like, take your pick. It could be Morgan Sound in Washington State. There's tons of these smaller companies that do high-level work at a smaller scale, but are just as successful when you look at a happy customer base.
Absolutely.
So I think the numbers are fine. It's not a great thing that we don't have as much stability as we want, but I'd much rather have a good quality vendor that I can call up and go, hey, this projector's lens is out of focus. Can you come over and tweak it for me? And they go, yeah, great. Because we've had that relationship. They made a better margin than another large monolithic company that throws in 20 projectors a week and goes, well, that's a you problem.
Or who are you again? So
yeah.
All right, guys, real quick as we wrap up here, I do want to mention one last story as we head to, honestly, I head to ISE. By the time this post, I will be fully ensconced in some sort of place in Amsterdam. The LG is pulling out of Integrated Systems Europe 2020. The statement on their website says, with the quote unquote, with the safety of its employees, partners, and customers foremost in mind, LG has decided to withdraw from exhibiting and participating at ISE, as well as MWC, which is the Mobile World Congress 2020 later this month in Barcelona, Spain. This decision removes the risk of exposing hundreds of LG employees to international travel, which has already become more restrictive as the virus continues to spread across borders, the virus being the coronavirus that they're mentioning there. Mike Blackman from ISE has also made a statement that is on our website, quote unquote, although Chinese airports are already exercising exit controls with health tests, we ask all of you who are attending ISE, whichever country you're coming from, to work with us and exercise some common health practices. If you have any relevant symptoms, or in fact any health-threatening symptoms, whatever they may be, we feel that, and you feel that you put exhibitors and yourself at risk, please seek medical advice and refrain from traveling. Tom, real quick question here as we wrap up, and a bunch of us, including myself and Matt Scott and our editor Mitchell, goes to Amsterdam and ISE. How big of a deal is this going to be at the end of the week, come February 14th, when we all kind of head out back from Amsterdam, understanding that only one exhibitor as of right now has decided not to show. LG, just for the record, is headquartered in South Korea, kind of right there in the middle of the Asia Pac area. We're aware of some companies, not South Korean companies or Asia Pac companies, but folks who have employees in those areas are asking those employees not to travel. So the rest of the company is traveling. They're just asking the folks that are in South Korea, in China, in parts of India, not to travel right now because of this. We're still going to get together. There'll still be roughly 80,000 people at the end of the day. But how smart is this, and the wisdom, I guess, of LG 3 or 4 days before the show opens?
Yeah, I mean, the timing of it is a little odd, but that's not LG's fault, right? I mean, we're learning more about everything. I mean, I'm no expert on the virus and what's going on, but I will say that I applaud LG, not because like the decision is a smart decision or a not smart decision, but I mean, I'm just guessing that LG took a look at, its workforce and its employees and, the folks who are going to be attending and representing LG or would be attending and representing LG at the event. And I'm guessing that those folks, they love their company and they love their work, but maybe they didn't feel comfortable going. And maybe the folks at LG kind of recognized, okay, well, we don't want to put our employees in that position. And they made a unique decision to decide not to put them in that position. And I just don't see any other perspective other than to applaud them for that, because they lose out on a lot, right? I mean, they were kind of the star or among the stars of the show last year, the year before. And, they're missing out on that opportunity, but they're making a decision that they think is right for their company and their employees. So, I mean, I applaud LG for that.
Bradford, same kind of question. You've been around, you worked for a manufacturer for a number of years, so you've been intimately involved even before most of us have ever set foot on a show floor. You've been in the back rooms and on the show floor when there was still sawdust. They made this decision basically when they had to, because sitting here, we're recording this on Thursday, ahead of the weekend before ISC. Folks are already showing up and have been since yesterday. So LG made this decision pretty much the day they had to, because had they not, then the folks that would have been building their booth would have showed up yesterday and started, construction.
I think LG pushed this decision as late as they could.
Yeah,
that's the one thing, because I think what they were doing is kind of what ISC and what Infocom and pretty much everyone's talking about is follow what the World Health Organization says, follow these guidelines. And then if you think it's worth doing something more, do something more. I know there have been a lot of people on the Twitterverse who are amazingly concerned about going to ISC and what the problems are. And I fully get it. I'm not downplaying it, but I'm also saying you don't have to go. Mm-hmm. Tim, if you were to say to me, you don't want to go, as your boss, I would go, well, okay, that's fine. Let's figure out how we're going to cover it. That is your prerogative. That's your prerogative as an attendee. The other thing is, I think there's a little bit of short-sightedness here. The first thing is there are another 50 companies from China that are not exhibiting. They have pulled out as well. So it's not that LG is the first one to pull out. It's the first large non-China company. The other thing is this is a large gathering place. True story, 100% true. Large gathering place. How many people went to Miami for the Super Bowl? How many people are in Las Vegas? How many people are at a theme park? How many people go to church on Sunday? It's a sense of scale and exposure. It is your decision. It's not something to be trifled with. I'm not trying to make light of it, but it's kind of like the same thing of when anti-vaxxers are letting their kids who haven't been vaccinated for measles go to a theme park. they are putting just as many people at risk as the coronavirus is. Now, admittedly, the after effects are much worse. It's a more serious complication, but then you look at Legionnaire's disease that started a Legionnaire's convention. You look at going on a cruise, a petri dish floating in the middle of the ocean. So I agree it's an important thing, and I applaud LG for making the decision they felt was right for them, their employees, and their customers, because it is a huge hit.
Yeah.
But we're still talking about them, so they're still getting some press. They're still losing a lot of money, but because I'm pretty sure ISE is not going to refund them, and I'm pretty sure the hotels and airfare is not going to get refunded. So it is a big deal, but I also want to say they're doing what they think's right.
Yeah.
I applaud them for that. There is no one right answer. It's kind of like, did you get a flu shot? A flu vaccine shot, Tim?
Yes.
Did you get one, Tom?
No.
See? So, Tom, would you go out to the movies during the flu season?
Well, reluctantly, yes.
But you have. You see that's kind of my point, is we're still in the same situation. But, it sounds funny. People forget that the flu kills over 8,000 people a year.
Yep.
So it's the same issue that it's on a much faster, worse scale. I'm not downplaying it, but I'm saying let's not just focus on the coronavirus. Let's focus on all these things that we have opportunities of ignoring and not dealing with, like measles at theme parks, like Legionnaire disease at conventions, all these other things that can happen just as easily that people don't think about. So I just think it's a little bit of, okay, let's be aware, let's take our precautions. It might not be for everyone. If you're pregnant, I would definitely say don't go. Tim, if you're pregnant, we have to have a little talk. But it's one of those, let's keep things in perspective. There were some people who I think were just shouting conspiracy theories and the sky is falling without looking at the overall context of this.
Yeah.
Yes, it's serious. Yes, it's big. But if it's not going to be our biggest problem at the moment. Yes, it has the ability to become a pandemic. But remember, SARS had the same thing, and we were able to manage and get through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've gotten a couple emails this week asking if I'm concerned, and quite frankly, I'm not. We're recording this on Thursday because I'm heading out on Friday, right? Heading over to Amsterdam. So yeah, we're all groovy. We'll be there. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. Mr. LeBlanc, thank you, sir. How do people get a hold of you or NSCA?
So nsca.org. You can follow me on Twitter at LeBlanc Tom. And most importantly, I'd like to see a lot of folks in person at the NSA Business and Leadership Conference in Dallas, which is February 26th to 28th. And we're really excited about that.
Yeah, you get to see me there too. So also, Mr. Bradford Ben, thank you, sir.
Your pleasure as always to have me on. You can find me at avnation.tv or bradfordben.com or any place your social media takes you to the Twitters at Bradford Ben. Once again, my opinions, my feelings, don't yell at Tim, yell at me. If you like them, they're my ideas. Everyone travel safe. Also, congratulations to those people who won for the AVNation Awards that Tim's going to be handing out at ISE next week. I've peeked in there and seen that I did not win. So I'm a little disappointed by that.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to. So
that and I jacked it to where you couldn't win. So.
Yes, exactly. I'm not allowed to. And since don't follow Tim on the Twitters, go to AVNation, take a look at what we're doing there, follow avnation.tv. Now he's just complaining about the St. Louis Blues because the Bears are off golfing for the next 6 months. So he has much less to talk about. But we do appreciate you listening and being part of this. We ask you to reach out, ask us questions and comments. We want this to be a conversation. In fact, Tim and I'm gonna foreshadow a show that we're thinking about of asking us questions, and we just go and talk about them. But we do very much appreciate you listening, as well as our sponsors who support us. Please make sure to say thank you when you see them at ISE. Travel safe, everybody, and be on the lookout for Tim. And just remember, I told him he's not allowed to buy any of you anything more expensive than a coffee.
That'll work. Yeah, I can do that. So, also, Bradford mentioned next week at ISC. Tune in, if you would please, every day at 5:30 Amsterdam time, so roughly 11:30 Eastern time. We will do, including on Monday, we will do a daily wrap up, a live stream from the show. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Matt, Scott, and or I will be hosting a live stream, kind of a daily wrap up, 5-10 minutes, kind of give you the sense of the show itself. Friday, the show technically ends at 4 o'clock local, so we will be doing that episode at 3:30 local. So if my math is correct, that it is roughly 8:30 carry the one. I have no idea off the top of my head. 8:30 in the morning, 9:30 in the morning Eastern time. So live stream will be here on AVNation. Matt Scott will be joining me, as well as a bunch of others. Check out the tweet up. Happens 4:30 to 5:30 local at the Poly booth, so you can come by, grab a drink, grab something to eat. If you see us, hit us up on the Twitters or just throw something at us as we're walking through the 15 halls of the 2020 ISC. So thank you to both so much. Thank you again to our sponsors. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That is all the time we have for AV Week.